So the summary, I want you to define your challenges, professionally as well as personally. Set realistic expectations. Mastery is not achieved overnight. I explained to Ed, Mark, and Brittany that this whole compliance program and everything, this was the beginning. We're going to be working very closely together, getting this all outlined, getting everything done. We may put a policy in place one day and the next day it changed. So it's going to be an ongoing. It's not going to be achieved overnight. Keep your eye on the goal. And if you want to do mentorship programs and work with each other, that's always a good recommendation. Okay, so you have the code of conduct. The other thing that I have for you is I wanted to make things a little bit easier on you and you not have to do a whole lot of just researching on your own. I put a compliance quick reference chart together so that it actually lists every single law and acronym relating to ambulance and health care for the most part, a little brief description on what it is, and a link to get more information on that. So that's something that I'm hoping will help you out. And I suggest that you learn those acronyms because let me tell you what, the health care rules, regulations, laws, Medicare, CMS, they love acronyms.
And where you talked about those cards earlier that you was getting from Amazon, and what that will be is the shift supervisor at each shift. 3 or 4 times a year, you sit down and you have a round table. It won't take you 30 minutes. You get a couple of hours of compliance training a year of that to go with the one she does every year.
Yeah.
Keep you fresh all through the year.
And you can make a, game, we'll put some competition in there. It'll be a lot of fun. Do you have any questions on this part of the training?
I'm a little confused just with some of the information we went through before, just as this has been coming up, so I want to talk about it just a little. What we had talked about was maybe that Medicare, Medicaid only sees our narrative. Do they?
That's not true.
Okay. Okay.
No, that's not true. Matter of fact, they don't even look at your narrative.
What was the question?
I'm sorry. The question was he was a little confused, but he had some different communication. He was under the assumption that Medicare and Medicaid only saw your narrative. And that is not true. Actually, the narrative section usually is the time of day, because if you've got that transport, that round trip transport thing, instead of denying the second half as duplicate, they look at the time of day. So that information will go in their notes section. They don't actually have a narrative section that you send them electronically. They have what's called a note section. And there's just a couple of little things that go in that note section, but no, they don't see your narrative.
Okay. So what they're actually seeing is our quick list, like our procedure list.
They see your procedures list. Yeah, there's very little, as the whole patient care report, they don't see everything that's on that patient care report by any stretch of the imagination. They get the patient's name, the patient's identification number, the origin and destination, when actually the origin, they just get the zip code. That's all they get, because depending on how much they pay depends on that zip code. So that zip code is very important to make sure you got the right zip code, because that could change the amount that you get paid. They get the destination information, they get an ICD-9 code, and they get your HCFS codes. They don't get a whole lot of the information on the claim itself. If they audit it, then they're going to look at the narrative, they're going to look at procedures, but procedures aren't even sent on the claim. Basically what the open lines of communication is that it gives you the ability, if you see anything, you hear anything, or you're concerned about anything that you've been taught and learning about compliance is being violated, then you're allowed to report that anonymously. even if you don't want to report it anonymously, no retaliation can happen to you. There can be nothing that happens to you because you chose to report something. So Ed's going to be setting up a open communication lockbox. We have a form that we've prepared that will be in various places in the service where you pick up one of those forms and you can just write all of the information and put it in this locked box. It'll have a slit in it. And then once a week, the compliance officer or his designated person will go and pull that out. They will scan that and send me a copy of that, and then the two of us will talk about what the concern is, and we'll go over with how to research that concern to see if it's a legitimate violation, if it's just a disgruntled employee trying to stir up some kind of problem or something, and determine if we need to get the county attorney involved to find out what action we need to take, if it's a self-reporting type of situation, what policy and procedure we're going to put in place to take care of that so that never happens again, and that kind of thing. So make sure that you understand that that is a tool that is now available. The other thing is the advanced beneficiary notice. Basically what the ABN does is it's just letting the patient know if their insurance does not cover this particular transport for any reason, that they are going to be responsible for the bill. And then they have three options. They can either say, well, just don't transport me then, or they can say, yeah, you know, I understand that, and then there's like one other option. So that's all that is. But so if you think for any reason that medical necessity isn't there, that's all you're doing is just letting them know that they may be responsible for the bill.
I've done one of the part before we used those, and they made us, there was a section in it where it had estimated bill, we had to put a price.
We're going to fill out that, a section in there, and basically we're going to have like ALS, oh, he said that he works for another service that they had to actually put in an approximate amount of the bill and stuff. So what we're doing with Allen County Ambulance Service is that section will already have, if it's an ALS emergency, if it's a BLS, what it is, and then you'll just have to check mark it, and then it'll already show the price. And then if mileage is included, then you'll have, which normally there's going to be, so you'll check two boxes, the base rate and the mileage. So we'll have all that on your form already. Okay, were there any other questions? We can get through this part because I want to make sure people can go get their children if they need to. Okay. So, compliance in the workplace is essential. True or false?
True.
See, y'all already know that. Good job. Now, I don't know, I'm hoping that you know this one, but if you don't, this is always a good thing to know. What is the name of the Kentucky Medicare contractor? Do y'all know that? No, that's Medicaid. That's one of Medicaid. It's CGS. And believe it or not, that is their name. That is not an acronym. CGS. They are actually the Medicare contractor for jurisdiction J15, which is Kentucky and Ohio. Okay. Okay, a baseline audit for the ambulance service can help determine several factors. There's actually 4 factors. I only need you to know one of them. So the 4 factors are: bills are accurately coded and reflect the services provided in the medical records. Another factor is documentation is being completed correctly. Another factor, services or items provided are reasonable and necessary. And the last factor, any incentives for unnecessary services exist. Okay?
Is There's a multiple choice. Yeah.
No, you just need to know one of those. So I guess, like documentation is being completed correctly. That would be, and this is like a services baseline audit helps determine this. Okay, now what happens if the ambulance service is audited and the government comes in and finds mistakes? They assign what is known as a CIA, and that isn't Central Intelligence Agency, that is actually Corporate Integrity Agreement. So basically, what it does, it's an agreement that they enter into with the government, and the government puts all these sanctions and requirements on the ambulance service. So the biggest incentive to find and fix compliance problems is to avoid additional requirements of a CIA. So basically, if you have a compliance program in place, then the sanctions and the rules that the government puts on you in these corporate integrity agreements is going to be a lot less. So that's another reason that Allen County wanted to get a compliance plan in place. Okay, there are 7 basic elements to any compliance program. I need you to know 3. Okay? So the 7 are development of compliance policies and procedures, designating a compliance officer, education and training programs, development of internal monitoring and reviews, responding appropriately to detected misconduct, and that was the one I was telling you is why we had to be so harsh on some of this, because they expect, if they find that somebody's doing something wrong, the government expects appropriate response when they know somebody did misconduct. Developing open lines of communication. And here's another one, enforcing disciplinary standards through well-publicized guidelines. So that discipline and misconduct is huge in a compliance program. Actually, CIAs were actually put out to motivate providers to hire compliance officers. That's just a little tidbit, so that's a true statement that a CIA was made to provide motivation for providers to hire compliance officers. Okay, what does OIG stand for?
Office of Inspector General.
Yay, Office of Inspector General. Good. Okay. EMTALA, EMTALA, is also known as patient dumping. True or false? True. Yay! Okay, I want you to be able to, because this is something I feel like is important for you to know, I want you to be able to paraphrase bed confinement according to the Code of Federal Regulations in subsection 410.40 parentheses D. So it's important as while you're transporting that you understand, if you're saying, if somebody says this patient's bed confined, I want you to know what they're saying and whether or not you agree with that. So basically, the patient is unable to get up from bed without assistance. That's one. The patient is unable to ambulate. The next key word here is or. It's not saying and, but or. The patient or beneficiary is unable to sit in a chair or wheelchair. So they can't get out of bed without assistance, they can't ambulate, and they're unable to sit in a chair or wheelchair. And also bed confinement means they were bed confined before and after the transport. So it can't be a condition that they just had and then they get somewhere and it's fixed and they come back and now they're able to ambulate. That's not bed confinement. Okay. Here's a good one for you. Bed confinement is synonymous with bedfast or non-ambulatory. True or false? You go! Give this man a hand. Good job. Yay! So that's important to know. Bed confinement is not synonymous with bedfast or non-ambulatory. That means you were paying attention on the other part because you knew that answer. Now, let's see if you all know this one. What is the key element of a compliance program?
Education.
Now, the key element, what did we go over very first? The very first thing we went over. Very first thing we went over. You had to go make copies of it. Yay! Who said that? Yay! Okay, so code of ethics and conduct is a key element of a compliance program. Okay, what do you think are some accepted reasons for medical necessity for the ambulance run? And I'm taking this right out of the Medicare Benefit Policy Manual, Chapter 10. What would you think?
Not able to sit.
Bed
confined, yeah.
Bed confined, before and after the trip, that's kind of important. Okay, so I want you to know three reasons for medical necessity. There's several of them, but I want you to know three. Okay, so we have bed confined before and after the trip, which that kind of unable to ambulate, that's kind of, I would put that under could be moved by stretcher only. Okay?
Put back stretcher on.
Mm-hmm. Could be moved.
Requires monitoring or oxygen during transport.
Well, oxygen I don't like. That's one, but you have to have a good reason why that oxygen had to be on that patient. So I like to stay away from that oxygen part. Was unconscious or in shock is a good one. Needed to be restrained to prevent injury to themselves or others.
Patient a danger to self and others.
Correct, yeah. And then always medical necessity is assumed when it's an emergency trip because they're transported in an emergency situation. So that's always.
Monitoring and suction.
You can, yeah. That would be a good one. They're on a ventilator. There's several different ones. I'm just wanting you to do three.
Requires a transfer to a higher level of care?
No.
I see that on some.
Yeah. No. That would not fly. I would not use that one. Okay, so this is going to be a multiple choice. What statement is true regarding compliance training? Okay? Compliance training is only critical for the compliance officer and board members. Do you think that's true? Okay. Compliance training is voluntary. Okay. Compliance training is mandatory for all employees of the ambulance service at least yearly.
Yes, true.
Good job. Compliance training is not necessary unless you are a new hire. All right. Good job. Okay, we've talked a lot about it, but do you all know what MTALA stands for? You know what that's an acronym for?
Emergency medical treatment and labor.
Emergency Medical Treatment and Active Labor Act. Good job. You do. I love it. I love it. Open lines of communication can be done anonymously. True or false?
True.
Now here's one that's going to make you think just a little bit. What is open lines of communication used for?
Protection of the one reporting and
Reporting
keeping us
violations.
compliant.
Okay, what's another word for like reporting violations? Reporting fraud and, good job, yeah. Reporting fraud. Reporting fraud and abuse is what the open lines of communication is set up for. You know who may sign when the patient is incapable of signing for the ambulance transport?
A relative that handles patient affairs or power attorney.
Okay. Okay, now you do know that if the crew signs, the crew also has to have that statement explaining why, an attestation statement that explains why, plus a representative at the receiving facility also has to sign. The crew cannot just be the only signature on that. So you all.
Listed on our patient waiting form.
Yes, yes. So the patient's legal guardian, I mean, all I need for you to do is put one answer down for me. A relative or other person who receives Social Security or other governmental benefits on the patient's behalf. A relative or other person who arranges for the beneficiary's treatment or exercises other responsibility for his or her affairs. A representative of an agency or institution that did not furnish the services but furnished other care services or assistance. And this is kind of where they put the ambulance service in a very peculiar situation, because the next statement is a representative of the provider or of the non-participating hospital. Well, you all may not know this, but you're not considered a provider. You're considered a supplier. And for some reason, because this is like their fifth one on that, but on the sixth one they put an ambulance provider or supplier. So it makes you look like in number 5, you can't just have that crew member signature because you're a supplier and not a provider. So it's one of those legal things where they put information in there that makes you completely confused, and you're not really sure how you're supposed to interpret this, and did they leave this off on purpose or accidentally kind of thing. But we kind of have to go with what the regulation says, and the regulation says provider and doesn't even mention supplier. But on the other one, it's an ambulance provider or supplier and the receiving facility. So that's where it comes in that you do not want to be the only one signing that, because you're a supplier and not a provider. Did you all know that? Okay. Fraud and abuse does not affect me because I am not involved in the billing process. True or false?
Oh.
Hey, I love the way you all came right out with that. Okay, what are some key elements to the patient care report? So just start listing some things to me that you feel like are a key element as far as billing, in regards to billing.
Dispatch complaint.
Dispatch complaint, yay! Chief complaint I'm not as worried about as much as the primary impressions.
Picture of what you see in the
Okay, give me some other specific things.
Procedures and results.
Procedures and findings, correct. Odometer readings are important because I can't do mileage.
Patient demographic.
Patient information, yes. Origin and destination, and the reason for the ambulance transport. So I only care if you list 4 things on that. One more. Now we're going to see how much you paid attention to our very first character quality. What is the key to learning?
Attendance.
Yes! What did you say, Ed?
I said honesty.
Honesty. I don't think you were in here when we started. So, good guess.
Always good to be honest.
Absolutely, absolutely. So attentiveness is the key to learning.